In this lesson, we'll talk about arrays. Arrays are used to represent large collections of data of the same type. Once created, arrays are of fixed size and they cannot be changed. They're in fact typically stored contiguously, so they're very fast to access. You can refer to elements of an array by something called indexing. So let's look at how we declare arrays. Arrays are declared by providing the data type followed by square brackets, followed by the array variable identifier. So in this case, numbers is an array of ints. Note that this just declares the array, but no memory has been allocated yet. To actually allocate the memory, you use a reserved word called new. You provide the variable equal to sign new, the data type followed by the size of the array. So this creates numbers as an array of 10 integers. Note that once the array is created, the size cannot be changed, right? Now you can combine declaring the array and creating it into one statement as follows. Right. Now, once arrays are created, each of the individual elements can be set by indexing. So, in this case, the first element is set to 2, the second element is set to 4, and so on. Note that indexing for arrays starts at position 0 instead of 1. Okay, now array lengths can be accessed by an attribute of the array called length, right? When the arrays are first created, all the values for the arrays are set to a default value. So if they're array of integers, then all the array elements would have been initialized to 0. If it was an array of booleans, all the elements would be initialized to false, and so on. Okay, you can access array elements by something called indexing, and you do it as follows. We've already done it earlier here. This statement accesses the fourth element of the numbers array. Now, once you do this, this is called an indexed variable, right? That's a new term that I would like you to become familiar with. Index variables can be used anywhere a normal variable would be used. So they can be used on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of assignments. They can be used within loops and such. Okay. Now arrays, instead of, one way to initialize the array is to set all the values one by one, but there is an easier way to initialize the arrays in a single statement. So in this case, you are declaring an array as well as creating it and initializing it. So here we have created an array of 4 elements, and they have been initialized to the values provided in the curly braces. This is equivalent to the following statement. Here we are declaring and creating the array and then setting the value, right? So again, with this approach, we're declaring and initializing in one combined statement. Now, what can we do with arrays? For example, if we wanted to loop over an array, what would be the best construct? Would it be a while, a do-while, or a for loop? Now, for loops are ideally designed to deal with arrays. Since all of the array elements are the same type, an array is fixed length, they can be indexed with a counter variable that you would typically find in a for loop. So let's take a look at some examples of processing arrays. So if you were to want to get a total of all the array elements, you could do it like this. You would create a variable to hold the total and then basically loop through the array. It is typical to define the conditions as such, where you initialize a counter variable that you use to index into the array, and your condition is basically going from 0 all the way to less than the length of the array, and you would increment as such and collect the totals, right? The similar pattern can be used to get the max of all the elements of an array, where you hold the value of the currently known max value in a variable. You initialize it to the first element of the array, and then you loop through it, checking if you have found a larger number, right? And you can use a similar approach to find the minimum element of the array or the average. It's a variety of uses. So let's try this out. Let's open our IDE, and here I have created an array and populated some random values, and it loops through the array and computes the total. We can use a very similar example to compute the minimum value. So here we would just copy the max and modify it slightly to hold the min. Going through the numbers, and say min. We find the number less than min, we hold it in min, and then we print min, right? Just very slight modifications, and we can probably get rid of this code. Let's run it upon the minus 52, which is indeed the minimum value of this array. Java gives us a special looping construct for stepping over each element of the array. Now, it's referred to as foreach, even though the keyword you use is still for, right? So it looks as follows. You have for, then within parentheses you have a variable that will hold subsequent values of the array. Now, the array is provided next after a colon, and then you have the body, which can be a block or can be a single statement. So we can actually try this out. Let's take this and copy it into our code. So we'll actually replace all of this and just print things out. So let's see what this looks like. It's very nice and concise. It just prints out all the values of the array. Now we should note that arrays operate on references. So what that means is that when you do assignments between arrays, they are changing pointers to locations instead of actually making copies of values. So let's look at a concrete example. Here we have declared and initialized two arrays, and when we do this assignment, numbers 1 is equal to numbers 2, numbers 1 is simply changing its pointer from pointing to this location that holds this array to the second location. No copies are being made. It's simply changing pointers to locations in the memories. So after this assignment, no variables are referring to this location in memories. So Java ultimately will garbage collect and recover that memory. Now, to actually make real copies of the arrays, you would have to create a loop that looks something like this, right? Or you can use a system method called array copy to actually make the copy, where you provide the arrays and start indices and the length of the copy that you want to make. Now recall that when we pass parameters of primitive data types such as int, double, and boolean, they're passed as value. So a copy is passed into the method. Arrays, on the other hand, are passed as a reference. So a pointer to the location of the first element of the array is passed in. And if you change the contents of the array in the body of the method, it will be reflected outside. Similarly, when you're returning arrays from the method, references of the arrays are returned and not a copy. Now we have seen string arrays already. And where would we have seen them? We have seen them as the parameter to our main method. So it's a string array called args, Now, you might be wondering where are those used, and those are actually used if you were to call your program from the command line, and if you were to pass in command line arguments such as flags, and you would access them with indexing. arg0 to get to the first item and arg1 to get to the next item. So let's actually try this out. I have actually added this already, and this program simply prints out the first two arguments. If you were to run it as is, you might get an error because we have not specified them in the IDE, but we can use the command line to specify them. So let's go here. We will go ahead and recompile our program, the command line, and then run it as so. Now here we can pass anything we want, and it prints the arguments. All right. So in this lesson, we have learned all about arrays. We have learned about how to declare them, what it means to allocate memory to them, different ways that arrays can be initialized, the meaning of an indexed variable, and how arrays and for loops can be used together to make interesting computation, the foreach short form, what it means to copy arrays, and how arrays are really used as references and not as values, and then a little interesting fact about how arrays are used in command line arguments. Thanks.